Welcome, welcome. My name is Lloyd Borrell. I'm your host. Today, I'm thrilled to have as my guest food mood expert Trudy Scott. Trudy Scott is a certified nutritionist on a mission to educate and empower people to find nutritional solutions for their anxiety and stress. She's the author of the Anti-Anxiety Food Solution, How the Food You Eat Can Help You Calm Your Anxious Mind, Improve Your Mood and in Cravings. And she's the host of the Anxiety Summit. Trudy Scott, welcome to the EMF Health Summit.
Lloyd, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. It's a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and I know my community is really interested in this topic, so I'm excited.
It's a genuine pleasure to have you here. So I'd like to start by asking you just quite simply to share your story and tell us how you got interested in electromagnetic fields and health.
Yes, so I am a nutritionist, and I had my own issues with anxiety. So in my late 30s, I was working in corporate America, and I got increasingly anxious. I had panic attacks. I developed social anxiety, and I had this, what I consider this perfect storm of factors that I felt were contributing to my anxiety. It was gluten issues, it was cortisol issues, it was heavy metals, and a whole host of factors that contributed to me getting this anxiety. And then I actually worked with a naturopath and a nurse practitioner and discovered this connection between food and what we eat and the environmental impacts. At that time, prior to the anxiety, I'd actually been interested in electromagnetic fields, and I had a building biologist come to the home, and I learned about the issues with the electrical field, certainly with using a hairdryer. I stopped using a hairdryer because I found out about, how much that can affect us. I learned about, standing and holding a blender and putting your hand on the blender while it's blending, and that being an issue. And I was very interested in cell phones because this was many, many moons ago, and we were just starting to get cell phones. And I remember reading up about the SAR, which is the specific absorption rate for those of you that are new to this, and being very interested and diligent about trying to pick a cell phone that had a low SAR rate. And long story short is, I forgot about that. I was cautious about it, but I didn't sort of play heavily into what I was doing. I discovered that the nutrients and my biochemistry was what was causing my anxiety. And I was able to eliminate the anxiety and the panic attacks. I went back to school to become a nutritionist and started doing this work, helping other women with anxiety find nutritional solutions. And always in the back of my mind, this, EMFs was an issue. And I actually wrote a book called The Anti-Anxiety Food Solution. And this was written in 2011. And at that time, I wanted to include a section on EMFs. And my publisher said no. And now looking back, I'm wondering if it's because of the whole political issue, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. The fact that we've got a lot of research that's being quashed, and we're not, there's industry against the EMF. So I'm sure that was part of it. I'm working on another book, and EMFs will be part of it because of what I've learned recently. I suspect that part of my perfect storm of factors that was contributing to my anxiety was EMFs. Now looking back, I think it may have been, I worked in a computer job. I was sitting in the computer all day, every day, and there was all these EMFs all around me. So I'm sure it was one of the factors that was contributing to my anxiety. But just more recently, I participated in Nick Pinot's Electrosmog RX course, which he teaches for practitioners. And this was just earlier this year. And this has reinvigorated my interest in the topic. And actually doing that course, I figured out that I am EMF sensitive. I've got electro-hypersensitivity issues, and it was contributing to my current fatigue and brain fog. So I'm really interested. I do want to just say up front that I do not consider myself an expert. I'm a nutritionist, and I help women with anxiety, but I do see that what I've learned recently about EMFs is definitely contributing to a lot of the anxiety and health issues that I see with my clients.
Yeah, and so it's very, very relevant what you're saying here to what you're admitting is this about the electrical sensitivity, your because this is a thing which we can't stress enough, and we have said it before during the summer, but I want to say it again because it's so important, is that everybody is electrically sensitive. That's what we know. That's what the science is telling us. Everybody. It's just some people can feel it and some people can't, but it's not because you can't feel it that these EMFs are not impacting you. And so, yeah, there is obviously, and it's not just about EMFs either, because there is, as you say, this perfect storm. That's just to say that it's EMFs and a whole load of things. What exactly, how important EMFs, we can debate this, until the cows come home, but from where I'm sat, it's very, very significant. There's something very significant going on with this EMS, and there is a political dimension which explains why this information is not getting out, and all the more reason for us to be talking about it here. But so I'd like to, I do want to get on to the research, but before we do that, I want to ask you, what are the 4 biggest takeaways you want people to get today? What do you want them to understand here?
Yes, and before we do that, I just want to go back to this electromagnetic hypersensitivity, because you bring up a really good point. We all are affected by it, and we are affected differently, and it depends on what's going on with you. Have you also got a gluten issue? Have you got leaky gut, and thereby it's affecting your blood-brain barrier? Have you got a low zinc? And so there's all of these factors that go together. And a lot of people will say, well, if it was so bad, why don't we know about it? And why aren't we being told how bad it is? And if you go and Google electromagnetic hypersensitivity, you'll see a lot of sites saying that there's no scientific basis. But there is growing research, and I know the work that you do is, getting this message out is really important. And I just want to mention there's a Dr. Dominique Valpom. I'm sure a lot of the other experts on the summit have mentioned him, but he's looking for reliable biomarkers that can actually determine who may be hypersensitive. So I think this is really good. But that being said, just because we know that, everyone who's got anxiety is not necessarily going to have gluten issues. Everyone with anxiety is not necessarily going to have high cortisol. There can be many confounding factors. I think looking at these biomarkers is a good start, just to give it credibility and to people to believe that this is a real thing. And you just have to ask anyone who has electromagnetic hypersensitivity how they feel when they're exposed to this, and you'll know that it's real. So I always say, if you've got these weird symptoms and you've tried everything, you've tried all the nutritional approaches, you've tried, whatever it is, you've tried meditation, you've tried everything else, and you're not getting answers, this is really something that needs to be investigated. Yeah.
And it's so many factors. And as you say, we've all got actually, there are things going on, bubbling under the surface, health problems just waiting to come to the surface, but which we're not aware of. It can be gluten issues, it can be cardiovascular issues, it can be emotional issues, so many different things. It's EMFs are part of this perfect storm, which few people are aware of, which we just, we have to share this message with the world. So let's talk about EMS and anxiety then, if we can, because you touched on it in your introduction.
Well, you'd asked about the biggest takeaway, so let me just go into those, and then I will talk about because otherwise people are going to say, oh, you didn't get to that.
Okay, let's do the takeaways.
Okay. So the biggest thing, I think, well, the first one is that it's more than just the SARS. It's more than just the heat effects. And a lot of people, and my mistake when I first got into this was thinking it was just the SARS and the heat effect. But we know, and we hear about tumors, and we hear about cancer as being an issue. The other one that we see a lot in the research is the fertility. It definitely does affect sperm count in men. But there are these biological effects. And I just want to touch on a few of them, because I know some of the experts here will be talking about them in more detail. But there's a Martin Paul published a paper earlier this year. Wi-Fi is an important threat to human health. I mean, this is a huge statement to make. And he's talking about oxidative stress. He's talking about neuropsychiatric effects. So we're having a direct impact on mental health, cell death, DNA damage effects on the endocrine system. So it affects sex hormones, it affects the thyroid, and then this other factor that he talks about, calcium overload. And with EMFs, the effects are cumulative, and children are affected at higher rates than adults. So it's very, very concerning. The whole oxidative stress is a big factor, and this plays into many different areas when it comes to whatever the health issue that is you're dealing with. The other big thing that I found that was fascinating when I did Nick's course is that there's huge limits to the science. And this goes back to what I said earlier, where people are saying, well, if it was really a big issue, why don't we know about it? Why aren't we being warned about it? And Nick actually shared that the studies funded by the telecommunication industry, they have a vested interest in saying there's nothing wrong with this, are 10 times more likely to find that there's no biological effect. And this represents a bias 2.5 times worse than big pharma. So in my world, when we're talking about nutrition and medications and anxiety, we're talking about big pharma and how they will manipulate the data in favor of medications against nutrition. But here we've got the telecommunications industry having a vested interest in this information not getting out. And when I heard that it was bigger than big pharma, that to me was just really, really eye-opening. The third thing is a lot of people will say, it's everywhere. How can we possibly escape it? And there's a sort of defeatist attitude, what can we do about it? And I like to think of going into a bar and you've got the smoke because a lot of people are smoking and you can see the smoke and it's swirling around and you can see it and you know that you mustn't walk into a room with a lot of smoke. I remember going to conferences in Las Vegas and, all the casinos have smoking still and coming out of there after 2 or 3 days and feeling terrible because I've been exposed to all the smoke. So I want people to think about EMFs as being this invisible smoke that you can't see. It's all around us. It's causing issues, but there is something that we can do about it. And I'm going to share some of the nutritional things that I feel that we can start doing. But I just remember hearing some amazing feedback and seeing some amazing research on what we can do. When I was doing this course, there was a grandmother sharing how her grandson was diagnosed with autism and was doing all the biomedical and nutritional approaches and seeing some benefits. But then they had a building biologist come into the house and they moved his bed 5 feet from where it was in the bedroom. And this child's improvements just became exponential. He just improved so much because he wasn't being exposed to this high electrical field that was affecting his healing. So when you hear something as powerful as that and a simple change as that can have such profound effects, I just feel that we need to have hope and we need to know that we can do something about it. The important thing is, I think, Lloyd, is admitting that it's a problem and then making some of the simple changes. There are some really simple changes that we can make that make things easier. And nutrients is a big thing and distance is a big thing. And then there's some tools that we can use to make things a lot safer for us.
Yeah, absolutely. There are many, many simple things we can do, particularly for people that are not hypersensitive, that have not got what Dr. Belpom has called EMF. We've got EMF intolerance syndrome, and that's all the more reason that people need to take action. Again, we're back to it affects everybody. Therefore, now is the time to take action. Don't wait until you're hypersensitive, because once you get hypersensitive, then it's not simple. It's not simple. But when you have the information and you're not hypersensitive, that is the time to work. Very simple things can make a big, big difference. So let's talk about EMS and anxiety then, if we can. So you talked about anxiety, you talked about your personal struggles. Can you share some of the research on that?
Yes, so there's a paper that was published in 2016. It's called Microwave Frequency Electromagnetic Fields Produce Widespread Neuropsychiatric Effects, Including Depression. And what they report in this paper, and I'm going to read some of them for you, changes in sleep problems, and we know melatonin plays a role in that, and there's a lot of research on melatonin being depleted with exposure to EMFs, headaches, depression and various types of depressive symptoms. Fatigue is a common one. Concentration and attention issues. So think of all these kids with attention deficit disorder. They're sitting on their iPads in the classrooms. They're using their iPads or watching movies when they get home on the iPad. Is that contributing to some of their attention issues? I think really it is a very big factor that we need to be addressing. Memory changes, dizziness, irritability, loss of appetite, restlessness, anxiety, nausea, skin burning and tingling. And these are all in the study. These are all factors that they are mentioning as being affected by EMFs. What are some of the mechanisms? I think we're still learning what some of the mechanisms are, but we know that EMFs affect our mitochondria. So there we've got the energy and the focus issues. We know it contributes to inflammation, and there's a ton of research connecting mental health issues with inflammation. If you've got a gluten issue, it's going to cause inflammation, which can contribute to anxiety and panic attacks and depression. And these EMFs are doing the same thing as well. We know that it affects the blood-brain barrier. The research that Val Palm did talks about how it affects the blood-brain barrier. And we know that if toxins are getting into the brain, that can cause anxiety. I mentioned the melatonin depletion and zinc depletion. So all of these can increase anxiety, depending on what's going on with you. And it can be different for different people. Not everyone's going to have the same issues. Now, I work with a lot of women, men and women, mostly with women, who they have anxiety and they've been prescribed a benzodiazepine or an SSRI. About a third of those people have a terrible, terrible time tapering off the benzodiazepine or the SSRI. And looking at some of the research, I suspect that EMFs may be a factor because of all of the above, because it's affecting melatonin, because it's affecting zinc, because it's affecting inflammation, because it's affecting the blood-brain barrier. Maybe those people who cannot get off the benzodiazepines, now when I'm talking a long time, I'm talking a year to sometimes 5 years. These people are suffering, trying to slowly but surely taper their medications. Could it be the EMFs that are a contributing factor? So if someone has issues with SIBO, and they, we hear about how chronic SIBO is. It's SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, where you've got this good bacteria in the wrong part of the digestive system. It's in the small intestine. Is that a factor with EMFs? We see so many people sitting on their cell phones right by their belly, and they're texting and they're watching social media and they're watching videos, and it's right by their belly. And there seems to be some research showing that the EMFs are affecting our microbiome, and we know the microbiome plays a huge role in anxiety and these digestive issues. So we've got so many factors that can be, a factor, could be why the EMFs are contributing to anxiety. Another one that I see a lot is high cortisol. If someone has high cortisol, now cortisol is produced by the adrenal glands, and it's our fight or flight hormone, and it helps us run away from the lion or the tiger when we're in danger. But if we have a chronic high cortisol, we're going to feel anxious, we're going to have insomnia, we're going to feel agitated and irritable. And if we find out what the root cause of the high cortisol is, some kind of stress, maybe a stressful situation, or it may be gluten, or it may be heavy metals, we can remove that, and then the adrenals should heal and the cortisol should come down. But I'm seeing a lot of people with chronic high cortisol, and it's just not coming down, and they're just sort of keeping it in check, but they're not getting their cortisol normalized. I don't know if EMFs are a factor, but I suspect they are a factor in a lot of people. So we've got many mechanisms on how EMFs can drive inflammation, they can lower nutrient levels, and they can contribute to oxidative stress, thereby increasing anxiety and depression.
Yeah. So there are, just to put that in perspective, there is a lot of research that has been done. And because that's another thing, people have got tendency to say they don't know anything about this, that are just looking at the TV for their news, or the National Enquirer, whatever it is, or the the Sun in England, the newspaper, that there's a tendency to say, oh, there's no research on this. There's decades of research. There's even research going right back to when electricity was first discovered, invented back in the 18th century, when they first started playing around with this, and later in the 19th century, Tesla and D'Arsonville, they were already noted some of these effects which you've talked about, adverse effects. They were already talking about this, so there is a lot of research. But at the same time, we don't have the complete picture. We don't understand all the mechanisms, but at the same time, we don't have to. There's so much research already that we just have to look at, the overwhelming research that there is and start acting on that. And just another point, which was worth noting, because you're talking about pharmaceutical drugs, is that there is a very strong possibility also that these EMFs are actually impacting these pharmaceutical drugs, which which millions of people around the world are taking, and so that they're changing how these pharmaceutical drugs are absorbed and utilized by the body, which is effectively changing the dosage of these drugs, and that's how screwed up is that? So, but anyway, so let's talk about solutions if we can. So. Let's talk about what you've done in your life, what EMF mitigation steps that you've taken. So you said you have been affected by EMFs, and and also how did you get your family on board? Because that's a biggie, because that is another struggle which I come across time and time again, is people that are electrically hypersensitive, and they're in a relationship and the other person just does not get it. So if you could answer that.
Yes, certainly. And it's funny that you say that you see it commonly. And it really is. Certainly with the women that I work with, it's usually the women who are on board and it's the husbands who are not. And it may be just the logical brain of the husband. And it may be going back to what we said earlier, that you can't imagine that, why wouldn't we know about this if it was a real problem? So let me just share. This is what I did, is I got myself a meter. And I know it's a really basic meter. It's called a cornet meter, and I'm not using it as well as I probably could be. But having this meter and walking around the house and measuring things got my husband on board. He started to get on board a little bit. He knows that I've had issues with my health over the years, and these things come up, and I look into them, and I find that it improves my health. So he's kind of on board. It's not a complete sell that I have to make. But once I got the meter, and we started walking around the house, and I showed him the different, it's lighting up bright red instead of green. He took the meter from me and he wanted to go around and measure things. So I think having that meter is great. I talked about this, walking through this invisible smoke. We can't see it, but when we've got a meter, I think that's really important. So, having that, I think was helpful. But before I got the meter, I started to make changes while I was doing Nick's course, and I saw dramatic improvements in my health. My energy went up, my sleep improved, the brain fog went away. And one of the things that I noticed was that I had what I described as a sticky arm. Like when I was using my mouse, I felt like I just had this thickness in my arm. It was like a sticky arm. That's the way I described it. And Nick actually said, oh, this is because EMFs affect your blood viscosity. It makes your blood thicker. And, I'm ashamed to say, but I'll admit it, I was using a wireless mouse and I was using a wireless keypad. And, my husband had bought it for me as a gift because they're so sensitive and they work so well. And here I am, a nutritionist. I should know better, but, these things slip past us. And especially with the interest that I'd had.
I won't tell anybody.
I'm ready to admit anything. We learn and I'm always learning. So so that was the first thing that went. And as soon as that went, I noticed that by the end of the day, I wasn't getting the sticky arm. I would just feel like my mouse arm wasn't working so well. So that was a profound thing. I know that the EMFs affected my immunity. I'd been getting boils. I had my immunity was down, so I was getting these boils. I've had 4 over the last 4 years, and touch wood, I haven't had any more. I'm hoping that is going to be improved. So I've seen improvements, and when I'm in an area where there are a lot of EMFs, I can definitely feel it. But let me just share some of the things that I did. Now, I'm going to mention a few things that I would never have, I'd learned about in the past and I was never doing. I would never have had an electric blanket because I know that's an issue. I've never had a clock radio next to the bed, and I'd never had my cell phone next to the bed or used it at night. So it was always on airplane mode. So those things I was already doing. But what I didn't know about was not using the cell phone in a moving vehicle. And the radiation that's bouncing around the car, because you're in this metal vehicle, and the fact that it's trying to ping on the nearest cell tower, and then you're moving to the next, you're driving down the road and now it's trying to ping the next cell tower. And if I say anything technically wrong, please feel free to correct me, but this is just what I've learned. So you don't have to have the cell phone in the car, and you can actually use Google Maps by key in your destination and then turn the airplane mode on, and it can still work. So I still have to figure out how that's working. I don't know if that's actually doing anything. Do you know if that's still safe using it like that, Lloyd?
It's a lot safer if you're on airplane mode, but the thing is because with these modern smartphones, sometimes airplane mode doesn't exactly mean that. You have to actually go through and switch off the Bluetooth and switch off the Wi-Fi, and there's lots of different means of wireless connectivity.
Yep. Yeah. So my cell phone is off most of the time. I'm on airplane mode 90% of the day. I'll turn it on and then put the phone far away, so it's downloading stuff if I need to. I've discovered that I can actually reply to emails when I'm on airplane mode, and it'll put them in the drafts. And then when I put it back, turn it back on, switch the airplane mode off, it'll then send. You can actually post on social media when you're on airplane mode, and it'll then post afterwards. So all of these little things that you can do. I've never, ever, ever held the iPhone to my ear, so I was never doing that. I do, I continue to speak on speakerphone, but I see a lot of people will pick up their phone, and I'm going to use my thing here because I don't have my iPhone nearby, but they'll be talking like this on their iPhone. So that to me is concerning. They're thinking, well, I'm not using it on my ear, but I'm going to talk like this. And that to me is concerning because now you're getting all the radiation there. So I think the important thing that I'm impressing upon my clients is distance. So you want it to be at least an arm's length away. And a great thing is to get your iPhone and get a meter and see what happens when you turn it on, when you turn off the airplane mode, and see how much radiation there is and see what distance it needs to be. The other thing is texting. A lot of people are saying, don't talk on the phone, text instead. But where are people holding the phone when they're texting? It's on your belly. I'm living in Sydney here, and I catch the public transport. So I'm on the train heading into the city, and that was a great place to catch up on the, social media and emails. Now I do it on airplane mode. So, but unfortunately, when you're on a public transport like that, you're getting the EMFs from everyone around you. So I actually take my meter wherever I'm going, and I will measure where I am, because I can usually feel that I'm in there's these EMFs around me, and then I'll put the meter on, and then it confirms it. So you're starting to get in tune with where the issues are, and then you can hopefully move away if you are super sensitive. But going back to the texting, Lloyd, sitting on the train, you'll see a guy sitting with the iPhone between his legs, with his elbows on his thighs, texting, and he's got his iPhone texting right by his groin. So that's problematic. So I think we really have to specify how to safely text and who can text at arm's distance. No one can really text at arm's distance. So I think, some things that I've learned, if I have to be texting, is if I'll be sitting on a couch and texting, I'll put a pile of pillows on my lap. So the phone is now this high above my lap, I can't show you on the screen, but it's really high above my lap. So I'm not getting that effects on my gut. I'm not getting those effects on my reproductive organs. So I think there's ways that we can do it. The other thing that I found that works really well is to text when you're at a desk, and you can actually prop the cell phone up in the distance. So you're not getting those effects. And of course you can get things like, iPhone, a cover that will deflect some of the radiation. You can get an ear tube, a headset that's with hollow ear tube. And I'd love to hear your input on this, Lloyd, because I think that's great because you're not getting the concentration of the radiation by your ears. But I've had some people raise concerns that where those hollow ear tubes come to a point, which is now sitting where your chest is, that may be a high level of radiation. Any thoughts on that?
Well, for me, the principal issue is one of this wire being an emitter receiver and transmitting, picking up all the ambient radiation, which is in the room, which is in the space, which is in the environment where you are, and transmitting it directly to your brain. And so by having this air tube, that breaks that transmission pathway. That's the most important thing. And we're always looking to, distance is your friend. That's true. It's even that distance is your best friend, I would say. But that is obviously, it's a simplification also, because and it's just a means of getting the message over about how important distance is. But there are situations, unfortunately, where that is not strictly true, because we have what's called EMF hotspots. This is really easy, actually, to identify. The software that can identify this in places like Israel, they've already got this. They can see on a computer in real time what the EMF hotspots are. But yeah, in terms of personal devices which we're using, it's distance is your friend, and there is no clear. I can't give a clear recommendation on that. The air tube is good or bad, but what I can say is it's better than the regular wire. And by all means, the most important thing is to gain this distance between you and the device.
Right. And then I think if you're using the ear tube headset, is not to have your cell phone sitting in your bag or your pocket, because you want it far away, so you've got that distance as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I've got three more. I've got three more things I was going to share, but go ahead. What were you going to say?
Please do. Carry on.
The other thing that I did was I completely got rid of Wi-Fi in the house. So we went completely wired. And that has been huge. That I felt a difference right away as being very effective. We got rid of cordless phones. I had no idea that cordless phones were as bad or worse, actually, than cell phones. So that was something that was very beneficial for me. And then looking at the electric fields in the house, I've got a feeling that electric issues are a problem for me. And the next step I want to do is turn off the circuit breakers to the bedroom at night. And I know a lot of practitioners like Dr. Klinghardt has found good results with turning off the circuit breaker at night. Now, some people will say, well, how do I do that? And it's a matter of going out to your box and turning off the switches and seeing what actually happens. You can leave your fridges on. You can leave, things that need to be on overnight, but having that safe area in the bedroom is really important. And then the other big thing is looking, I went around the room with the meter to make sure there was nothing on the other side of the wall. The bed's actually against a window, so we're fine there. But if someone had a fridge on the other side of that bedroom wall, that could be a very big problem. And I think that was the problem with the little boy with autism that I talked about. There was a fridge on the other side of the wall. Right. And then I just wanted to go back to the Wi-Fi. A lot of people have contacted me since I've been blogging about this and writing about this, saying, I've got so-and-so service provider, and it's Wi-Fi. I can't go wired. They tell me it has to be Wi-Fi, and that's not true. You can use your, you use your router and you just switch off the Wi-Fi and you connect everything with wires, and it's called Ethernet wires for people who don't know about this. You can just go to your local technology or electronics store and just say, I want to go, get rid of Wi-Fi in my home, they'll probably look at you like you're a little bit crazy. Why on earth would you want to get rid of Wi-Fi? But you can do it very easily. It just means you've got to have wires. You may have wires running down the passageway if you've got your computer in a different location to the Wi-Fi router. The important thing is also, Lloyd, is to have that Wi-Fi router far away from living areas, not having it in a bedroom, certainly not having it in the office that you're working in. And actually, before I moved to Australia, I was working in my home office in California, and I had my Wi-Fi router right next to my arm, and I actually ended up getting skin cancer on my left arm, which was pretty close to where the Wi-Fi router was, for about 2 years. So I think that was another factor, whether it was that. I mean, our sun was definitely a factor. I sunburned a lot as a kid, but talking about this perfect storm, I had that predisposition. I was exposed to really high levels of EMFs from the router and ended up getting skin cancer on my arm. So I'm connecting a lot of dots, certainly with my health.
It sounds like it. And just want to go back to what you said about the meter there, because that's super important, the EMF meter. And the meter you showed us, if I'm not mistaken, is the Cornet ED88T Plus, which is a really great meter because it measures electric fields, magnetic fields, and radio frequency radiation. So it's a tri-mode meter. And it is actually quite a complex meter. There's not many buttons on it, but it's actually quite complex. But it's inexpensive, and seeing is believing. And that is the key for you. And even if you are electrically hypersensitive, you want to get the best meters you can buy. Don't get cheap crap meters, folks. You will waste time and money. You need to get the best meters you can buy. And for your own understanding, and then when you're going to talk to other people, they won't take you for someone who's completely cookie. If you've got the meter, they can hear it. And when that thing's going off and it's sounding like a Geiger counter, then people start to get the message. When you bring a cell phone next to it and you can hear it doing its stuff, connecting with the cell tower, it can be pretty eye-opening, if not scary, the first time that you hear that.
Yes, definitely. And the next thing that I actually want to do is I want to have a building biologist come to the home, because I want them to measure, and then I want to confirm that what I've learned, that I'm on the right track. Yes. And then, because this is a whole area of expertise. People become certified as building biologists, and I know a little bit, I know enough, yes. But I want to make sure that what I'm doing is correct. So I think that's an important thing that we need to be saying.
You're absolutely right to state that, and these are not mutually exclusive. Having an EMF consultant, be it building biologist or other, and having the meters, these are not mutually exclusive. Both go together very well. The difference is it's about empowerment. That's why meters are important to me, about you taking control of the situation. Sure, you can get somebody in, that's a form of taking control. But when you've got the meter, then you can get that meter out whenever you want. I'm not saying you should get it out every day, but you do need to monitor this, because this is evolving all the time, and it's evolving big time. It depends where you live, but if you're in an urban environment, this is evolving. Then it's like off the scale evolving in certain environments, in certain people who are living in high rises, places like that. It's only with a meter that you can begin to comprehend what's happening. But
absolutely. And, talking about things changing, I went to a conference in Melbourne just after I'd done this course, and I had my meter, and I took my meter with me, and I was measuring EMFs on the train, and then I measured them actually in the airport. I was sitting in a waiting room waiting for the plane, and it was low. And then as people started to arrive and they were all on their cell phones, I saw things going up. Sitting on the plane was interesting. Actually, in the hotel room that I stayed in, I was measuring to make sure that I wasn't getting EMFs, whether it was electric or whether it was from a cell phone tower nearby, close quarters to where I was sleeping. And if I was, I would have turned around and had my head the other end of the bed. And I know there's things you can buy. I'm still learning about all the protective clothing and things that you can buy, which I'm a little concerned about, because I've been having some feedback from people saying saying that they've used some of the protective fabrics and they've used some of the protective clothing and had adverse effects. There was actually a paper done where they had MS patients use a protective hat that protected the base of the brainstem, and a lot of them saw 90% improvement in their symptoms. But the authors do talk about the fact that you can have a Herxheimer effect. So as your body's starting to recalibrate, as it's starting to get rid of the oxidative damage, as the inflammation's going down, you may actually feel worse initially. And if I actually contacted the authors and they sent me some of these hats, and I've tried them. They haven't really helped me, but I've got one here. I'm willing to put it on to show you. Are you familiar with the hats that I'm talking about? I'll put it on just for a good laugh, because I think laughter is good for anxiety, and it's good for healing. So this is the hat. So what it is, it's offering protection against the brain stem, and it's offering protection against the top of the head. And what they had these patients do was wear these hats for 4 hours at night and wear them for 4 hours during the day. And this is where they saw huge improvements. And MS. So MS is, serious multiple sclerosis with pretty severe symptoms. A lot of the people were bedridden, disabled. And when they used these hats, they saw huge improvements. So that was another big thing to me, to see that something as severe as that with something as simple as this could have an impact. Now, since I did a blog post about this, and this is the actual hat that they use. They actually contacted the authors and they sent me two, and they're having people use them and giving them feedback to further, share the benefits and the negative effects. Since then, I actually had someone in my community contact me and said they had a really bad effect from wearing it, and it made things a lot worse. So we do have to be careful. One other thing that I forgot to mention, Lloyd, is when I started to make these changes, I also learned about earthing and grounding. And I knew about it, but I hadn't really taken it seriously. So when I was making these changes, switching off the Wi-Fi, getting rid of the cordless phones, I started to ground, which means you go outside and you sit with your feet barefoot on the grass. Think about going to the beach. That's another great way to do some grounding, walking on the sand. But I would do it outside in the grass. And I didn't feel good when I first started doing it. And it's probably because it was, my body was trying to get back into homeostasis. So grounding is another wonderful, simple way to start healing from some of the damage from the EMFs. And there's a lot of research on grounding, a lot of research on showing how beneficial it is for cardiovascular disease, helps with insomnia, helps reduce inflammation. So a lot of research on it. It seems like it's a little bit woo-woo, but just doing that grounding can start to heal. So if I'm at a conference and I'm going to be exposed to a lot of EMFs, I'm going to be making sure that every day I'm outside doing 30 minutes of my feet on the bare earth, so I can get some of those benefits.
Yeah. So there's a lot which you said there, but just want to briefly come back on the shielding, and it's one of the things that I've talked about on my website, and I actually wrote a fairly provocative article which got me quite a lot of criticism, which the title was something along the lines of "Is EMF shielded clothing a scam?" And there is no black and white on this, and there is very probably a healing effect with the shielded clothing, but at the same time, there is something really fundamental which people need to understand, is that really this whole EMF sensitivity, this sensitivity to these man-made frequencies, this sensitivity, because what is that? These are energies. These are non-native energies. This sensitivity to this non-native energies, what is it really? It's a wake-up call. It's a wake-up call for me, you, for everybody. It's a wake-up call for humanity. And the wake-up call is saying, reconnect with nature. That is where true healing happens. It is by reconnecting with nature. And one of the ways you can do that is by earthing. And there's the pros and the cons to earthing too. It's not black and white either. And we've got a whole talk on earthing with the director of the Earthing Institute, and talking about the research on the summit. but reconnecting, and when I say reconnecting with nature, what I mean essentially, most importantly, is reconnecting with nature at a deep level. So I'm not talking just about physical. I'm talking more in the higher realms. I'm talking about spiritual, and it does sound woo-woo, but this is what I've learned in my journey. But we're not talking about my journey today. We're talking about yours. So let's talk about smartphone and internet addiction, if we can, please, because there's a growing awareness of this problem, particularly, with the youngsters. And you talked about this a little bit earlier on. You mentioned it. These devices are literally taking over people's lives, but not just teenagers and smaller toddlers even you see using these things, but everybody is it seems everybody is addicted to their little device. So what can people do to claim their lives back?
Well, you say kids, but I see a lot of adults who admit that they're addicted as well. And there's actually a good book called Digital Cocaine, which basically equates this digital addiction that we have to drug addiction. And we know that drugs, as well as carbohydrates and sugar, give us this dopamine hit in some instances, which will make us feel good. If we think about, if you've done a social media post and you get a whole bunch of likes and you get a whole bunch of comments, every time someone likes it, every time someone comments, you get that, oh, that's good. Oh, and you go back because you want to see, is someone else commenting? Oh, what's the discussion like? Has someone shared it? Oh, so it's that, you get that good feeling like, oh, this is good. It's just like getting a hit of some kind of drug, and it's a real addiction. And just like we have addiction to sugar and carbohydrates and drugs and digital addiction, there is a brain chemical imbalance often. And when you've got low dopamine, which is tied to cortisol and adrenaline, you're going to feel this feeling that I just described. If you use social media, or let's just use social media as an example, because this is an easy one to think about. But if you use social media as your reward, like you've had a busy day and you think, I'm just going to get on and veg for 2 hours on social media. It's my reward. I deserve it. Too bad about anything else. That could be low endorphins. We need it's our comfort, it's our reward, it's our treat. We use it like that. There's an amino acid that you can take that boosts your endorphin levels, and then you're not going to need to do that. You talked about nature. Just getting out in nature is going to boost our endorphins. If being on social media makes you happy, if it gives you joy, that could be a low serotonin thing. There's an amino acid that helps to raise your serotonin levels. It's tryptophan. And this, in turn, can break that addiction, can make you happier, so you no longer need to use the social media or whatever the digital addiction that you have. So if you find that you are, and a lot of people will admit that I'm addicted, I just don't know what to do about it. You'll see people putting apps on their phone, so they don't have their social media on their phone. They're trying to stop it. I've seen people actually change the colors on their phone to make it less enticing to get on social media if it's black and white. But if it's that true addiction, there's the amino acids, and this is what my expertise is using amino acids to help with anxiety, with this emotional attachment that we have to foods, or digital addiction or street drugs, whatever it is. If we are using something to self-medicate, we need to look at the brain chemicals involved and use the respective amino acids, whether it's tryptophan, whether it's GABA, if it's you're needing to calm down, whether it's tyrosine to give you that dopamine hit.
So you're a certified nutritionist, as I mentioned in my intro. What nutritional tools can we use to make us more resilient and perhaps help us recover from EMFs?
So everything that I teach about and write about and blog about and speak about is going to help, because it's going to reduce inflammation, it's going to replete us of nutrient deficiencies, it's going to make us balance out whatever may be an issue. So real whole foods. So that's the foundation. Real whole foods, traditional foods, foods that our ancestors ate, food that our grandparents ate. So we want to be eating tons of vegetables to get all those antioxidants. We want to be eating oily fish to give us those omega-3s. We want to be eating grass-fed red meat to give us iron and zinc and omega-3s and B12. We want to be eating small amounts of fruit, healthy fats, coconut oil, butter, yogurt, fermented foods if we can tolerate dairy, kombucha, sauerkraut. All of these real whole foods have a huge impact on setting a foundation, getting off foods that may be a problem, getting off foods that may be part of the perfect storm. Gluten, for many of my clients with anxiety, is a big issue. It depletes serotonin, it depletes zinc, it causes leaky gut, which is going to cause nutritional deficiencies. It increases inflammation. It causes, and because it causes leaky gut, it may be affecting the blood-brain barrier. So getting rid of the foods that are now compromising our health. And for some people, they may have anxiety because of gluten. Someone else may have rheumatoid arthritis. Someone else may have a child with autism because of gluten issues. So these foods that are problematic can cause different symptoms in different people. I just happen to work with anxiety, so this is what I see with my clients. Caffeine. And another thing that has to go because it increases anxiety, it can affect the hormones, it's high in pesticides. So if someone is consuming caffeine and it's regular coffee, they are going to get exposed to all those pesticides, which then put an extra burden on the body. Sugar's got to go. Adding in specific nutrients depending on each person's biochemistry. Now, some of the nutrients that we see depleted with EMFs are zinc. It seems to affect iron in some way, iron levels. So making sure that those levels are good. So doing functional testing, working with a practitioner and figuring out what your unique deficiencies are would be very important. Looking at cortisol levels, I mentioned that earlier. Addressing the core things that keep us going. So we've got a healthy gut, we've got a healthy microbiome, our adrenals are in good shape, which reduces inflammation and enables us to handle stress a lot better. We've got good levels of omega-3s. We've got good nutrient levels. But then there's some specific things that the research is showing is beneficial when it does come to EMF specifically. And there's not a ton of research in this area, but what I'm seeing is very, very encouraging, Lloyd. One of them is rosemary. Now, rosemary is a wonderful herb. And there's actually one study that looked at rosemary tincture and found, and this was specifically looking at the harmful effects of cell phone EMFs and using a tincture of rosemary. And what they found is rosemary, I'm going to read from the paper, rosemary could play a protective role against this harmful effect through its antioxidant activity. Now, I am a big fan of essential oils, and there's rosemary essential oil. There's no research on showing that rosemary essential oil has the same benefits, but I think we can extrapolate in some instances, and we know how beneficial essential oils are. There's a ton of research on how they're beneficial for anxiety and insomnia and chemoprotection and so many other mechanisms. So I now travel with rosemary essential oil. I'll use it in a carrier oil like coconut oil and use it topically. I'll diffuse it, and I actually now put a drop of rosemary essential oil and peppermint oil in my shampoo when I'm washing my hair on a daily basis. And I just feel like I'm getting those added benefits there. I know Dr. Klinghardt uses propolis and rosemary tincture with his patients and sees really good results. So I think it's really exciting to think that, something as simple as rosemary could be offering us some of this protection. And I've got a few more foods that I wanted to just share, but I just wondered if you've got any questions before I go further.
Not particularly questions, just observation. I love rosemary and rosemary infusions, rosemary in cooking, roasting potatoes in rosemary, doing like a vegetable dish and sprinkling some rosemary on the top. Yeah, rosemary, absolutely. You're right on with that.
Yeah, so include it in your diet. I love the way that you said rosemary infusion. Get a olive oil rosemary infusion and use that as your salad dressing. So there's so many ways that we can incorporate rosemary into our diets. as well as using these other mechanisms. It was that same conference that I went to that I mentioned in Melbourne just after I'd done the course. We went on a little sightseeing tour down the south of Melbourne, and I was very excited to find kombucha in one of the restaurants that we stopped at, and they had fresh rosemary. So there I was munching on some fresh rosemary and drinking a kombucha, which also happens to have benefits for electromagnetic fields. So there's actually a study done on rats. It's called The Effect of Kombucha on Trace Element Levels in Different Organs of Electromagnetic Field Exposed Rats. Now, kombucha is a great fermented beverage that's providing good probiotics, so it's helping with the microbiome. And what they found is that the rats that had been exposed to EMFs had their iron levels messed up and had their zinc levels messed up, and they had a higher copper level. And this goes directly back to anxiety, because zinc and copper play an important role in anxiety. And if you've got very high copper levels and very low zinc levels, you're going to feel more anxious. So what the EMFs were doing was disrupting the zinc copper balance. And when they had the rats given kombucha, when they were exposed to the EMFs, they found that these adverse effects went away. No human study yet, but we see so many other benefits with kombucha. And I suspect we'd see similar benefits with other fermented foods, maybe kefir, if you can't do kombucha, or maybe some sauerkraut. We know that sauerkraut and kefir affects our microbiome. We've seen how it affects GABA levels in the gut. So I suspect we may see some benefits there. Another one that I wanted to mention is melatonin. This would be used as a supplement. There's quite a number of studies showing that melatonin has neuroprotective effects. Some of them specifically with studies looking at EMF exposure. And there's actually a really new study that just came out looking at males who'd had a traumatic brain injury, and they found that the time-release melatonin helped them sleep. So yeah, we've got this perfect storm, something going on. We've had a brain injury. We may have some damage to the blood-brain barrier, which may make us more susceptible to EMF. So getting that melatonin on board is beneficial. But in this particular study, they found the melatonin actually eased the anxiety as well. And they feel like it worked similar to the way a benzodiazepine worked. So we got all of these things that can help us. And then I've got one final one that I wanted to share, but I just wanted to see if you had any comments on that.
No, great information. Please carry on.
So the last area I wanted to share goes back to the amino acids. And I mentioned how beneficial the amino acids are if you've got this addiction. There is no research on tryptophan or GABA specifically on the EMFs, but it's an area that I've got expertise in. It's something that I work with all my clients on, is addressing low GABA levels, which is the physical tension where you've got the stiff and tense muscles, and the low serotonin, which is the worry and the ruminating thoughts, where you've got, you second guessing yourself, you're a worrier, you have panic attacks, you have phobias. So these are two areas that I work very closely with. And I've seen some research showing how tryptophan helps with lead toxicity and how GABA helps with fluoride toxicity. So I love to look at the research. So I started to dig into the research to see if there were similar mechanisms with lead toxicity and EMF toxicity. And lo and behold, the same things that lead affects also seem to be affected by EMFs. The fact that it increases inflammation, the fact that it affects melatonin levels, the fact that it increases oxidative stress, the fact that we see higher levels of peroxynitrite, this bad oxidative molecule. So I think we can safely extrapolate that down the road we may see some research showing that GABA and tryptophan may offer some type of protective effects against EMFs. Certainly, I'd feel comfortable saying if someone is EMF sensitive and they do have anxiety, it's worth doing a trial of both GABA and tryptophan to see if it helps. Yeah. There is, let me just give you an example on why I would feel comfortable saying this, is Lyme disease can make you more anxious. It can affect serotonin levels, and it can affect GABA levels, and it can make you more anxious. Now, if you have anxiety as a result of your Lyme disease, while you are dealing with the infection, you're working with a practitioner to get rid of the Lyme disease bacteria, you can actually take GABA and tryptophan to ease some of the anxiety symptoms while you're dealing with the underlying issues of the Lyme disease. And I feel the same way about EMFs. If the EMFs are triggering low zinc, if they're affecting your melatonin levels, if they're causing this inflammation and thereby causing low GABA or low serotonin, I believe that using the amino acids are going to give people relief. So with the amino acids, you get results very quickly, right away. You feel relief, you feel hope, and then you can deal with all these other things. Because the other thing is, when you hear about the EMFs and what's going on and how bad they could be, you may have this terrible fear. You may have this overwhelm. And the amino acids help with some of that overwhelm. So you can now say, logically, yes, I can do this. I can take these steps. I can start grounding. I can make these changes in my life. I can get a meter. I'm feeling better. I feel calmer about it. And then I can make all of these other changes that are then going to start the healing process.
That is very pertinent what you just said there, and that particularly for people that literally from one day to the next, which is what happened to me, become electrically hypersensitive, is you find yourself in this situation of complete overwhelm. And even just sometimes people who just suddenly learn about this, they feel overwhelmed. So that's really great. Some great tips there. We're running out of time. Do you have any last comments or observations you'd like to share with the viewers?
I just think, don't feel like this is impossible. That's my biggest thing. You know, you've got this wonderful resource with you sharing this information, Lloyd. Your website and your podcasts that you do are fantastic. We've got all this research. You've got all these practitioners who are aware of it. I think if you are someone in the public and hearing about this for the first time, just take baby steps. Just do simple things, do a few things to start making changes, just start learning slowly but surely. If you have already immersed yourself in this, you've got tons of new information to learn, you can take it to the next level. And I think my biggest message is for practitioners. I think we as practitioners, we need to take this upon ourselves to be educating our clients, because we have some clients who don't respond to the diet changes, who may get some benefits from the amino acids, who may get some benefits from zinc supplementation, but if they're not seeing 100% resolution, then we need to start saying, could this be an issue? And I think, Lloyd, the other thing is not waiting until it's too late, because it's easy enough to say, well, it's not affecting me now. When it happens, then I'll deal with it. And that's what happened with my anxiety. And it happened with this, when I was in my 30s, it happened with my anxiety. It got to the point where I was having anxiety and panic attacks, and then I did something about it. With the EMFs, I was getting tired and I was having brain fog. And then I woke up to the fact that this may be a problem. So I think if we can do something sooner, and we've got 5G coming, we don't know what that's going to do to us. So we really need to be on top of it and be doing something.
We do need to be on top of it. Trudy, where can people find out more about what you do?
So if anxiety is an issue with you, my book, The Anti-Anxiety Food Solution, goes into more detail. I've got a blog, everywomanover29.com. I have a wonderful community. They ask me questions on the blog. I learn from them. I have a Facebook group, Trudy Scott Anti-Anxiety Food Solution, and we have a great interaction on that community. So if you want to come and chat there, that would be great. Just make sure you're doing it on your PC and not your iPhone, or making sure you're doing it from a distance on your iPhone. And then for practitioners, I've got the Anxiety Nutrition Institute, where I am going to be teaching practitioners how to use the amino acids to help with low serotonin, to help with low GABA, to help with this anxiety and phobias and addictions. So I've got lots of resources depending on what you're looking for.
Fantastic. Listen, Trudy, it's been really just the information you've shared here has been awesome. A lot of honesty, a lot of modesty too, and you made us laugh also. So, Trudy Scott, thank you so much for being part of the EMF Health Summit.
Thanks, Lloyd. Thanks for having me, and I look forward to sharing it and hearing the other experts.
And thank you for everybody who's joined us today, who's been part of this movement. Thank you for being part of this movement. My name is Lloyd Borrell. Thank you. Take care. Have a great day. Bye-bye.